Hey folks, I'm Tori, welcome to Bass Strategy. Today we have part 2 of my reel maintenance series, and today we're going to be cleaning out a Baitcast reel. I've got my Curado 200K, and we're going to be doing just a basic maintenance on this reel, and I'm going to show you how we do that. Cleaning a Baitcast reel is really not that difficult. It's actually, I would consider it easier than a spinning reel, just because all of the elements that you're cleaning are really right under here. Just this one piece that you're taking off. Of course we're going to be taking off the spool and the other side as well, but there's not a whole lot of pieces in there that you need to worry about. So because it's all right in here, I find it to be a lot easier than a spinning reel. So just one note about this reel before we start. I have modified it slightly, just one small change that I wanted to point out. Normally when you get this reel, this part has a spring and it'll stay on here. It will not come out completely. I don't really like that, so there's just a C-clip that I'll show you on the inside that I removed. This is another plus to doing this reel, is if you don't like that feature, you can just remove it and not have to worry about it anymore. Before we start, if you missed it, last week we did an introduction video and I went over all the tools you're going to need, where to find your parts. In this video description, I'm going to put the link to that old video, but I'm also going to put some timestamps. The first timestamp is going to be the end of your basic maintenance, and the second timestamp is going to be where you can begin to reassemble from that point. So let's get started doing the Curado K. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here, we've got the reel in front of me, and I'm going to take off both of these side plates here. So this first one is easy. Just going to put that lever down. This is going to pop out again. I've already removed the piece of the C-clip, so it'll come off for me every time, but I'll show you where that is on the inside in just a moment if you haven't done this already. So now, I'm going to have to remove the spool. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove my handle, and to do that, there's a screw right here. I'm going to take that out first. Now with that screw out of the way, this piece right here should pop right up. You remove that. And here's this nut here. I'm going to take this with my 10mm wrench, and I'm just going to loosen that up and unscrew it. And with that removed, I can just take off the handle entirely. Get that off to the side. There is a spring in here. It's spring loaded, so just be careful to keep that from flying. And remove that. Now this spring here, I'm going to take that out, and then I'm going to just unscrew this part right here, this little nut. I'll put that in there. And now there are two washers. I'm going to slide those out. I like to keep these together. Just going to put these in here. Okay. I'm going to remove this knob here, spool tension knob. Remove that. There's another small little washer in here, right there. I'm actually going to use one of my tools here to kind of help get it up. Might need a little bit of encouragement. And then once I pop it out, I'll just grab it. and gently. There's little grooves in this drive shaft here up here, so it kind of wants to get stuck, but just gently pull it out. That's it. And I'll put that in there. Alright, so now that all that's out of the way, I can then remove this side plate, and there's just a series of screws down in here on the other side, and I'm just going to take those all off. And there, right here, underneath your thumb bar here, there's the little hidden screw right there. It's a little bit smaller. I'm going to need a different screwdriver to get it. Here it is. Drop that in there. And now this side plate should pop off. Now when I'm taking it off, I like to hold it up in the upright position because there's a whole lot of small parts in there that when this is off are going to be free. So I'm just going to carefully take this off, put it to the side, and there's the interior to the reel. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to grab my rubbing alcohol solution, and I'm going to take off, these are yoke springs here. I'm going to take off these yoke springs. There's 2 of them. Drop them in there. Okay, I'm going to remove, this is a series of gears in here. Let me show you. So this is a locking plate. There's really not much to that. I'm going to put that in my rubbing alcohol. On the opposite side, this is another gear here, and this gear is what actually triggers your, engages your spool after your cast. So I'm going to put that in the rubbing alcohol solution. This is one of my drag washers on here. I'm going to take that off. I'm not going to put that in my rubbing alcohol. I'm going to put that off to the side for now. And then in here is another drag washer. I'm going to take one of my tools it's going to be a little bit stuck on there from all the grease and pressure. I'm just going to pry it off a little bit. And again, that doesn't go into the rubbing alcohol. I put that off to the side for now. And this gear here is now free. I'm going to put that into my rubbing alcohol. And I'm going to take this and put it off to the side and let those soak. Now these drag washers, I'm just going to put these off to the side for now. I'm going to clean those later. I'll show you how to do that when we're doing reassembly. Okay. So now, this entire inside here, I'm going to want to take some Q-tips, dip it into my rubbing alcohol solution, and just start cleaning off the interior here. It's pretty clean looking, but a lot of water and dirt will get trapped in here. So I'm just going to go in here and make sure everything is clean. I'm going to look at it and just see how it's looking. We did forget one. Just take that out. Can't forget that. I'm going to take this piece, put that right into the rubbing alcohol, and this piece as well, this other side of the gear, put that into the rubbing alcohol. Don't forget that. And we're going to clean up in here. Now, I'm going to take off this drive shaft here. Now there's just 2 screws, here and here, and I'm just going to take that off. Now the reason you want to take this off as part of just basic maintenance is this grease in here breaks down pretty quickly because this is a high wear part. Okay, so you want to make sure you clean out in here where there's a little bearing. There's that little bearing at the end of this, and it gets worn out. The grease in there gets worn out pretty quickly, so you want to make sure you clean that up in there. You want to clean out that little spot really well, and before we apply new grease, make sure it's a nice clean area. Take a dry cotton swab and just dry that out real nice. So one of the reasons why I like using rubbing alcohol is because it dries pretty quick. It evaporates very quickly, so by the time I'm ready to reassemble, this cavity here and all my other cavities are going to be dry. Now, one of the things I am going to take apart is the worm gear. But if you are, that is not going to be part of basic cleaning, so if you're not going to be doing that, I recommend taking the time to go in here the best you can and try to clean out the interior here. But I'm actually going to do that after I remove my worm gear. I'll have a little bit more access, and that's when I'll be doing it. So for this piece, you could do one of two things. If you'd like, you can, this one here just has a little C-clip, and I can pry that off and take the bearing off, remove all of these pieces and clean them thoroughly. Or if you feel like it's clean enough, you can just go in with your cotton swab and just clean it up by hand. I like to take a paper towel if I'm doing that and just clean off this as well, because you don't want to put the bearing inside the rubbing alcohol. So if you're going to choose to leave this on, you have to be careful cleaning around it. I am going to remove this C-clip. So C-clips, the trick to them is first you're going to need something to pry them off with, and you're just going to make sure once you pry, there's a little gap in the C-clip here. And once you pry it off, it's going to want to fly off. So I kind of want to have part of my finger on top of it, so when it is broken free, it doesn't fly off, or if anything, it'll just slide down below me. So you just kind of go into that gap, you push down, and you start pulling out, and then carefully let it come out. And so that C-clip will come out free. I'm going to put that aside. Underneath there is a little washer. Take that out, put it aside. And then your bearing here should pop off free. Just like that. I'm going to clean that by hand. So now this piece here is free. I'm going to put that into my rubbing alcohol. This little plastic gear should be free. Put that in my rubbing alcohol. Just be careful with this. There's actually a little piece here that comes through here. It's with a spring. Okay, and you want to be careful not to lose that piece. That's what locks that plastic gear into place. But now that it's all taken off, I'm going to leave that in there, and I'm just going to drop this whole thing in my rubbing alcohol. So one thing I don't take apart on my reels is this clutch. The reason is because there are a few loaded spring pieces, and they're just can be troublesome putting it back together again. So I'm still working on it. Whenever I'm getting rid of an old reel, I practice taking apart my clutch, and once I get better at it, I will add it into my cleaning arsenal, but for now, I clean around the clutch and I leave that in. So again, as I'm taking things apart, I'm always looking around, wanting to make sure everything in here is nice, has been touched, and is clean. So sometimes there's grease tucked into these crevices in here. I'll just take my tool and try to push it off a little bit. Wipe it off on my paper towel. And just keep going. So I'm going to start cleaning off the inside. Now this here on the interior of this spool is going to get very dirty. So you're going to go through a lot of the cotton swabs. Cleaning this up, the first thing is underneath this thumb bar. That gets very dirty. Ugh. Anytime you're fishing and all that scum, it all gathers up in here. So really spend some extra time into some of these exposed pieces. This is where you go through your cotton swabs. Really take your time finding all the little crevices. Making sure you hit every one. You'd be surprised where some of that gunk finds. And if you can try to use some of your paper towel instead. Rip off a small piece, dip it, and try to go about it that way. Sometimes that's a little easier. You basically want this to look, when you're done, brand new, like there was never any grease in here at all. Alright. So now I'm going to actually go in and take out my worm gear. That gets really dirty, but this could be, depending on your reel, can be a little bit more of an advanced piece to take off. There's a lot of other small pieces you're going to have to end up removing to get that off. So this is a good place to stop the basic maintenance, and we're going to pick it back up again when we are putting this back together. Now, if you don't end up taking out your worm gear, the alternative is you can just take a cotton swab and try to get it externally, and you just can spin this gear around with your hand as you try to clean off that gear the best you can. But we're going to take this apart now, and I will show you how to remove it completely. First thing I'm going to do is remove this C-clip. So I'm going to take my tool, go in here, same thing, just start sliding it out. Here's my C-clip, put that aside. That comes out. I can put that in my rubbing alcohol, let that soak for a minute. Okay. Now I'm going to take off this C-clip. Now, I will point out the tricky part is here, once you take off that gear, there is play in here with the worm gear. So it slides back and forth. Just keep that in mind. That's going to be really important when you put it back together again. It can be a little bit of a headache. So I'm going to push that downwards so my C-clip is on a nice surface. And I'm going to pry that one out. There it is. Carefully take that off. Put that to the side. There's a little washer in here. When we get in here, try to get a little bit underneath it. Here's that white piece I was telling you. Once I took that C-clip off, the white piece came off. That's fine. We're going to put that off to the side. And my worm gear is almost free at this moment, so I'm just going to take this off. There we go, put that over here. So now it would seem like this worm gear would be free, and it is for the most part, but it kind of just gets a little bit stuck as you're trying to pull it out. And what's happening here is this part right here needs to be unscrewed. And be very careful with this part. You don't need to take it off, you just need to loosen it just enough for the worm gear to come out. And you just want to leave that in. If you can, you want to leave that part in. I'm going to put this into my solution. Now sometimes there are reels that sometimes you're going to have to take off this top part to get to access to this here, the worm gear, and this screw down here. Sometimes you don't. It depends on your reel. And then it's just a couple more screws you have to take off. There is there's a little screw in here that you take off. It slides out a bar, and then this whole piece up here would come out. But where I removed my worm gear, I don't have to do that. So all I'm going to do is take a Q-tip, and this gets really dirty in here. Look how dirty. This isn't even that dirty, but you can see where all that gunk gathers right up in there. And this one's not that bad.